So now I'll try to begin the message. I don't have a title for the message today because it's two very different parts. The first part of the message in Exodus, we're going to cover all of Exodus chapter 4, but the first part of it is the second half of the conversation that Moses and God were having on the Mount Horeb. We're just finishing that conversation. And then the second half of Exodus chapter 4 is Moses' return journey back to Egypt and what first happens when he arrives. And so they're very different things, the different scenes. They certainly flow one after the other, but we'll even see as we go through here, not everything in here is strictly chronological in the way it's written down. And that'll be a little bit obvious as we read through. But they're just two very different parts. And normally, I would like to split this up into two messages. And it is killing me not to do that. But I have set out as a goal to get through this book this year. And that will never happen if I slow down everywhere I want to. And so we're going to try to give as much as I can here. And if you have questions afterwards, I would welcome those questions. And I may even... I want to address them, and if I can't address them fully now, I'm happy to get material to you or have discussions later, because some of these things might be rather involved, that you might have certain questions that there's an explanation for, but it's rather detailed, those kinds of things. So I think we've seen that already in the Exodus series so far, that while we've tried to dig deep, there are certainly things that maybe we would have delved into at other times that we've not, and hopefully that's been acceptable. But this is, I know of no other way to do it and get through it in this time. So that's what we'll be doing. So Exodus chapter 4, you could consider it maybe two messages in one. I hope it's not what we get in terms of time. But Exodus chapter 4, verses 1 through 17 being the first half, and then 18 through 31, what remains. Now, last week we considered Exodus chapter 3 and the incredible, I think, disclosure of God, self-disclosure of God to Moses. And then we read about what will be the disclosure of God through Moses to the Israelites. Right? He says, look, this is who sent you? Tell them I am who, or he says, I am who I am. And then he begins to give Moses these answers for what he should tell others about who he is and what he's like and what he intends to do. So it was a wonderful and profound revelation of God in Exodus chapter 3. At the same time, though, the other thing that we read about in this chapter, and really as the context of that revelation of God's name and of how we come to know His attributes, we find ourselves reading of a command from God to Moses in Exodus chapter 3, that Moses would be His agent in the world to deliver the people out of Egypt and into the land promised to their ancestors, all in fulfillment of God's promises and purposes. And so you got to remember, God shows up and says, I have heard their groaning. I have seen what's happened. I am coming down here. I am here to deliver, and you're my man. And Moses, says, well, I'm nobody to do that great task, right? And God says, oh, but I'll be with you, and it will surely come to pass. It will succeed. Then Moses, says, well, they won't believe me. They won't, they'll say, who sent you? And so God declares who He is. And it's in that context of being a God who's there to deliver and rescue His beloved people and fulfill the promises He made, because that's what He said He would do, that He says, I am who I am. Watch and see. God is not going to He's not content to identify Himself as the great God, though that's what the name Elohim or God means, or the God of this thing or that attribute. People say, well, God is love, and He is, but He's also so many other things. He's not just one thing. He doesn't say here, I am the God of redemption. I am the God of love. I am the God of deliverance. I am the God of promise. He is all of those things. He's also the God of wrath and power and fury and faithfulness and covenant and so many other things. He doesn't identify himself as this thing or that thing. He is the God of their fathers who promised to them, and He is who He is. He's come down to deliver them, to fulfill His promises to their ancestors, to have mercy upon them as a people, and to execute justice upon the Egyptians. He is what they see Him to be, or what they will see Him to be. He is what He has promised. He is what He has been and what He has done in the past. He's not contained in a definition or a name, but is rather revealed by the actions He takes and the words He speaks. And this is the way it is with everyone that you can know. Right? This is part of the issue with being required to call people whatever they wish to identify as, is it doesn't really matter what they say. We know people by what they say and do. That's who they are. That's how they reveal themselves to us. And we make a judgment upon that and give them a name upon that basis. And this is what God is saying. I am who I am. You watch and learn. Observe me. Listen to my words. Study my actions, and you'll know me. I am who I am. We don't just have to take it as, well, I've been told that God is this. You can know God. He's telling them, I'm going to reveal who I am to you. In the days that come, pay careful attention and know who I am. He defies our categories, our mental boxes, to emphasize one aspect of His nature and to identify Him with that one thing entirely would be to de-emphasize and misrepresent all other aspects of His nature and character. And so His answer is to trust and wait and watch and see who He is. But Moses is very reluctant to follow God. In chapter 3, we begin to read about his objection to this and of God's answers to him. At first, these objections seem very reasonable, but as we progress, when we get to the middle point of chapter 4, they are more and more stubbornly against being involved. To the point that by the end of the conversation, in the middle of chapter 4, Moses just asked God to find someone else, anyone else. And at this, we see the anger of God toward Moses. And that is where we will pick up in this message today, in the middle of this series of Moses' objections. And then halfway through the chapter 4, Moses begins his journey with his family back to Egypt under God's command and expectation to be God's representative in delivering the people of Israel. So, chapter 4, let's read the first 17 verses. Then Moses answered, "But behold, they will not believe me or listen to my voice, for they will say, 'The Lord did not appear to you.' And the Lord said to him, 'Well, what is that in your hand?' He said, 'A staff.' And he said, 'Throw it on the ground.' So he threw it on the ground, and it became a serpent, and Moses ran from it. But the Lord said to Moses, 'Put out your hand and catch it by the tail.' So he put out his hand and caught it, and it became a staff in his hand, that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has appeared to you." Again, the Lord said to him, "Put your hand inside your cloak." And he put his hand inside his cloak, and when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous like snow. Then God said, "Put your hand back inside your cloak." So he put his hand back inside his cloak, and when he took it out, behold, it was restored like the rest of his flesh. "If they will not believe you," God said, "or listen to the first sign, they may believe the latter sign. If they will not believe even these two signs, or listen to your voice, you shall take some water from the Nile and pour it on the dry ground, and the water that you shall take from the Nile will become blood on the dry ground." But Moses said to the Lord, "O my Lord, I am not eloquent, either in the past or since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of speech and of tongue." Then the Lord said to him, "Who has made man's mouth? Who makes him mute or deaf or seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now therefore go, and I will be with your mouth and teach you what you shall speak." But he said, "O my Lord, please send someone else." Then the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, "Is there not Aaron, your brother, the Levite? I know that he can speak well." Behold, he is coming out to meet you, and when he sees you, he will be glad in his heart. You shall speak to him and put the words in his mouth, and I will be with your mouth and with his mouth, and will teach you both what to do. He shall speak for you to the people, and he shall be your mouth, and you shall be as God to him. And take in your hand this staff with which you shall do the signs. All right. So first of all, as we consider the beginning of chapter 4, we must remember that in this context, reaching back into chapter 3, there are 3 times that God commissions Moses to go to Egypt to deliver the Israelites from Egypt, that he tells them to go. And each time, Moses seeks to get out of it using a total of 5 objections. Think of this is the way you ought to think of it. Not unlike a friend who perhaps is trying to get out of a party that they've been invited to, right? At first, the reasons are minor and seem very reasonable. But when you give an answer to those reasons, they come up with more and more serious reasons not to go. And when those have been overcome as well, then the person is left admitting they just don't want to go, right? They just don't want to go. Don't want to be part of it. And this is the flow of the conversation between God and Moses. In chapter 3, verses 7 through 15 is kind of this first commission. In verse 7, if we go all the way back to chapter 3, verse 7, then the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sufferings, and I've come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And now behold, the cry of the people of Israel has come to me, and I have also seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppressed them. Come, I will send you to Pharaoh. Come. It's an invitation. Come on. I want to send you. I'm going to do this great thing, and I want to use you to do it. So come on. There's the invitation. But Moses objects. And the first one sounds good. Well, verse 11. Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? It sounds like he's being humble, right? Well, no. I mean, surely you should pick someone more worthy than me. Who am I that I should be the one? And that sounds good, right? Nothing wrong with that. God says, oh, don't worry, don't worry that you're not anybody. I'll be with you, and we're going to succeed. We'll come back here together on this mountain, and you and Israel will worship me. It will work just fine. Well, Moses isn't, that ought to reassure him, but he doesn't want to go. So he has another objection. And we read about this in verses 13 through 15. Then Moses said to God, if I come to the people of Israel and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? What will I say? Right? Well, what am I going to tell them? Which is perfectly reasonable. We talked about that. Like it's reasonable for them to want to know what are our expectations if this God delivers us. How will he treat us? How will he respond? What will he do with us? What is he like? What's his name? How shall we know him? What does he want to be identified? Or how does he want to be identified? How is he revealing himself? Perfectly reasonable. And God tells him, I am who I am. Watch and see. I am that I am. Say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. And God also said to Moses, say this to the people of Israel. So this is now a new commissioning. Verse 16. Verse 15, God also said to Moses, say this to the people of Israel, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and thus I am to be remembered throughout all generations. He says, look, go tell them, I'm the one who promised to your ancestors, and I mean to fulfill it. Tell them he's the one who sent you. But now the verses 16 and following, all the way down to chapter 4, verse 12, is the second commission. Look at verse 16. Go and gather the elders of Israel together and say to them, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob, has appeared to me, saying, I have observed you and what has been done to you in Egypt, and I promise that I will bring you up out of the affliction of Egypt to the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, a land flowing with milk and honey. And they will listen to your voice. And you and the elders of Israel shall go to the king of Egypt and say to him, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews. So now you're going to go my charge is you are going to go to the Israelites and say these things, and then and they will listen, and then you're going to go to Pharaoh, and what are you going to tell him? The Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us, and now please let us go a 3 days' journey into the wilderness that we may sacrifice to the Lord our God. But I know that the king of Egypt will not let you go unless compelled by a mighty hand. So I will stretch out my hand and strike Egypt with all the wonders that I will do in it. After that, he will let you go. And I will give this people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. So go talk to Pharaoh, and then now it's going to succeed wonderfully. I will give them favor, right, in the sight of the Egyptians. And when you go, you shall not go out empty, but each woman shall ask of her neighbor, and any woman who lives in her house, for silver and gold jewelry and for clothing. You shall put them on your sons and on your daughters, so you shall plunder the Egyptians. That's the commission. Go to the people, go to the elders of Israel, go to Pharaoh. It's going to succeed. Wildly succeed. And the people will go and ask for all these things. It'll just be given to them, and you'll walk out of that place and plunder the Egyptians. Second commission. But Moses objects. Moses answered, but behold, they will not believe me or listen to my voice. Now he's arguing with God. God said, he just said in this commission, you go speak to the elders of the people of Israel, and they will listen. And Moses says, but they won't listen. They won't. Isn't that what he says? But behold, it's like, look, God, you don't understand. Listen here. They will not believe me, and they will not listen to my voice, for they will say, the Lord did not appear to you. God, you said they will believe me, but I'm telling you they won't. It doesn't matter that these words you told me to say to them, they're not going to believe it. They will not believe. So the Lord said to him, what's in your hand? He said, a staff. And he said, throw it to the ground. So he threw it to the ground, and it became a serpent, and Moses ran from it. And you picture that scene? I mean, he's got this staff. It's like, throw it to the ground. And now it's a snake, and he just runs. Ah! He runs. Right? A deadly snake. The kind of snake you run from. Now, some of us, that would be all snakes. Others, it would be certain snakes, right? He's out there in the wilderness as a shepherd. He doesn't run from all snakes. I'm sure he's had to kill many of them in order to keep his flock safe. But there are some, you just go. And he ran. This is the scene. And so this is Moses' objection and how God is dealing with it. First sign. So he threw it to the ground, and it became a serpent, and Moses ran from it. But the Lord said to Moses, and you can just imagine, it's like Moses thinks like God means to do him harm or something. Here, take the staff, throw it to the ground. Right? It becomes a snake, and he runs off. And God says, stretch out your hand, grab it by the tail, pick it up. You know, it's like, surely God doesn't intend for the snake to kill Moses or harm Moses. He could have grabbed it any old way. He didn't need to run or anything. But he's having this conversation, and he's just terrified from the snake. And he goes, and God says, stretch out your hand. And it seemed like he could have told him to grab it anywhere, but Moses wouldn't grab it anywhere. Grab it by the tail. You know, so here's Moses trying to get the snake or whatever, and he gets it. And he grabs it by the tail. It's his staff again. Right? However that happens. It's an amazing sign for sure. So he put out his right hand and caught it, and it became a staff in his hand. And then we pick up the quotes again. That they may, and it's like God tells him, he does this, he grabs it and becomes a staff again, and God says, that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has appeared to you. It's like, okay. It's a confirming sign, right? Good. God's given me a sign. And again the Lord said to him, gave him another sign, put your hand inside your cloak or into your bosom. And he put his hand inside his cloak. Angela, can you grab my phone real quick? Sorry. And I need to hit send. And now surely some of you will have in your phones a picture you can look at someone's hand This is a severe form of psoriasis, which is probably what we're talking about. The text says leprosy, but we know that what we call leprosy is definitely not this, because it doesn't become white like snow, right? And we don't know if it even means exactly white like snow. It says leprous like snow. Could be flaky, could be a lot of different things, but that was an example of kind of a severe form of what's called scale or plaque psoriasis, and so that's what this is what we mean. Something like that, very likely, certainly not just leprosy. So we read, put your hand inside your cloak, and he put it inside his cloak, and when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous like snow. It's like both times God gives him take the staff, throw it down, and he runs. And this time, what is wrong? What kind of signs are these? It's like, it's this negative, very negative image here, right? Then God said, put your hand back inside your cloak, and he takes it back inside his cloak, and when he took it out, behold, it was restored like the rest of his flesh. And God says, if they will not believe your words, God said, or listen to the first sign, they may believe the latter sign. And if they will not believe even these two signs, or listen to your voice, you shall take some water from the Nile and pour it on the dry ground, and the water that you shall take from the Nile will become blood on the dry ground. So a third sign, right? You take some water out of the Nile River, right? Pour it down on the dry ground, and on the dry ground it will become blood, right? So it's not like I took this water out and it's blood in the thing. I pour it out on the ground and it's blood now, right? This is what he says. These are the three signs. So God answers that objection. But Moses said to the Lord, "O my Lord, I'm not eloquent. I'm not a good speaker." Right? So they won't believe me. Oh, they'll believe you. Here are all these signs. Well, but I'm not a good speaker. Now think about, what is the commission here? The commission is, go speak to them, get them to believe you, so that they will want to do this and follow you, and then go to Pharaoh and tell him these things, and I will do all this stuff. And Moses is like, well, but they won't believe me. He says, okay, here's all these miraculous signs. Well, but I'm not a good speaker. Like, do you think the signs will fail? You need to be a really persuasive speaker? What do you mean you don't speak well? Like, what does this even matter? It's the most pathetic excuse, like, maybe ever. You've got all these miraculous signs you can do. You speak well enough to have a conversation with God about the stuff. I mean, you think all these miraculous signs, well, yeah, but they might see all those signs, but if I'm not like a dynamic speaker, they're probably not going to believe anything. It's stupid. But that's the objection. Now, we say, well, what does he mean I'm not eloquent? Well, it's like he's heavy of speech. Well, what does that mean? It may mean, some people think, well, it means he's forgotten his Egyptian language and he doesn't know how to speak very well. Well, that's not likely, because he seems to go back and have no problem with any of that. And he says also that he has never been I am not eloquent either in the past or since you have spoken to your servant. I've never been a good speaker. Whatever that, I've never spoken in a proper way or whatever. I've always been heavy of tongue. Well, I'm slow of speech and of tongue. That's what it means. I'm heavy of speech and of tongue. So he's not eloquent, heavy of speech and of tongue. So what is I think it's likely just he's not people talk about him, maybe he has a stammer or something. It's just, right? Stammer. Something that way, potentially. Or he's terribly bad and getting in front of people and trying to explain things and talk about it. Could be a lot of those things. We don't know exactly what it is. It really just doesn't matter much, but this is his objection. I don't speak well. And then the Lord said to him, well, who has made man's mouth? Who makes him mute or deaf or seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now therefore go, and I will be with your mouth and teach you what you shall speak. Which to me makes me think I'll teach you what to speak. The idea is he's just not good putting his words together, in on the spot kind of thing. He's evidently a very good writer. But, so anyway, so God says, well, I'll teach you. Now therefore go, and I will be with your mouth, and I will teach you what you shall speak. Both things. And the objection again is answered. He complains about his ability to speak well and that this will make the task impossible. God answers that He's the one who makes these abilities or causes the lack of them. He is more than able, therefore, to deal with them. And He promises to be with Moses and teach him what to say. I say that in these early chapters, so much of what we read about is about a revelation of God. And this is certainly a massive one. Who has made man's mouth? Who makes him mute or deaf or seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Right? Whatever, all your inadequacies, it's on me. I made you that way. Right? It's amazing. Like, we tend to think, like the Lord doesn't see any of those inadequacies as a reason why Moses can't do these things, but rather just a reason for Moses to be dependent upon God to do them. It's amazing. God takes full credit for whatever problem Moses has with his speech. All the embarrassing situations, the failings of his past, the times where he just felt deeply the inadequacies of his ability to speak, the ridicule he may have endured, God says, yeah, I'm the one who caused that for you. Right? He's not the one ridiculing, He's not the one doing those things, but He's the one who created this issue. He's very well aware of it. It's His idea. He made it that way. The implications of that are certainly massive, but for the immediate context, He's telling Moses this to win Moses' confidence. Right? Do not I make all these things? I will be with you, and I'll teach you what you shall speak. But now Moses' last objection, and what really was the root issue all along. He simply doesn't want to go. But he said, "Oh my Lord, please send someone else." Right? Please send someone. Someone else. And this is what verses 13 through 17 is, this third commission. So he just begs off of it. Just please send someone else. Send anyone else. Well, the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses. And he said, "Is there not Aaron, your brother, the Levite?" He calls Aaron the Levite. And as such, I just say Aaron may have already been well respected among his peers. There's a theory that's gaining a lot of traction right now among biblical scholars that the Levites, maybe even before the time of the Exodus, were the group among the Israelites that God used to preserve all those old stories and everything else. They preserved through this Levitical line, that tribe, or what became a tribe. And it's very, very possible, as we'll see some things in that later on in Exodus as we keep reading and read the way that Aaron was relating to the people of Israel. So more on that in the weeks to follow. But God says Aaron is able to speak. The anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, "Is there not Aaron, your brother, the Levite? I know that he can speak well." He can do it. Fine. You don't want to do it? We'll send Aaron. But he doesn't send anyone else. He says send someone else. Like Moses wants out of the obligation. But God actually insists. He's like, that's fine, I'll send reinforcements, but you're still going. Right? This is amazing. Aaron is able to speak, so I'll speak through him, and you'll be like God to him. In other words, Moses, I'll let you out of some of the speaking parts, right? But you are still going to be the human face of this deliverance. I'm going to come deliver the people. You're going to be the human face of that. If you want out of some of the speeches, we'll use Aaron. That's fine. But you're still the man. He shall speak for you to the people, and he shall be your mouth, and you shall be as God to him. And take in your hand this staff with which you shall do the signs. He already told him, here's this staff. He picked it up. It's as though Moses must have put the rod down already, right? It's like he's there, he got the staff, set it down, becomes a snake, pick it up. Now it's a staff again. And He's arguing with God about not going to go. Please send someone else. Here's the staff. Please send someone else. And God says, nope, not going to happen. Right? And so there's the staff, and it's just send someone else. And God says, look, there's Aaron. He's coming out. He's on his way out here to meet you. When he sees you, he's going to be glad in his heart. You will speak to him, and you speak to him. You'll put the words in his mouth, and I will be your mouth. I'll be with your mouth as what to say to him, and with his mouth as what to say to them. I'll teach you both what to do. He shall speak for you to the people, and he shall be your mouth, and you shall be as God to him. And it says Moses is like, okay. And then God says, and don't forget the staff. Right? Go on. Don't forget the staff. And take in your hand this staff with which you shall do the signs. Don't forget it. And so Moses is this very reluctant deliverer of the people. He didn't want to be a part of it. Like, do you see that? He just begged off of this entirely. When we read in Exodus chapter 2, turn with me there, verses 21 and 22. And Moses was content to dwell with the man, and he gave Moses his daughter Zipporah. She gave birth to a son, and he called his name Gershom, for he said, I have been a sojourner in a foreign land. This is the reality. He's out there. He's just content. He's not at all thinking about delivering his people. It's not like this burning desire in his heart, and he just can't wait the one day to get back there and really deliver them. He doesn't care. He's closed that chapter of his life. At one time, he cared deeply, but he's moved on. And now God shows up and says, how are you going to deliver them? You wanted to do this before? Come on, let's go. And he says, I want nothing to do with it. Pick somebody else, anybody. He says, well, your brother, okay, maybe he speaks a little better than you, but you're still going to go. And don't forget the staff. So this is it. These objections that Moses had, and God won't have it. God said he was angry. We ought to read these words, this last bit from God, in that way, as though he's angry. The anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and he said, oh, is there not Aaron, your brother, the Levite? And it's almost, you wonder if it's a jab, like they were both Levites, but at least Aaron's a Levite. Like, you don't want anything to do with this? Oh, Aaron's a Levite, right? We'll use him. I know he can talk. Evidently you can't speak, but I know he has a mouth and it can work, and we'll use that. He's coming out here to meet you. He's going to be glad to see you. You don't even want to go over there. And you're going to talk to him. He'll speak to the people for you. And I'll be with both of you. You think, I don't want to hear, well, Aaron's not trained either. Guess what? I'll teach you. I'll teach him. And grab the rod and get on your way. God is angry. There's nothing, he's not like, he's given up pleading with Moses. He's commanding him in anger to do this thing. I think that usually escapes our mind. We read the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses, and we just think God's kind of a little bit exasperated, like, all right, now I got to do something else. Like, there were times when the Lord Jesus Christ was just exasperated a bit with his disciples and bearing with them. There were other times he rebuked them in anger. And this is the way God is angry with Moses. He's not just kind of, all right, how long do I have to bear with you? He's angry with him. And he speaks to him in this anger. Not in judgment, but he's angry with him. Moses was invited to participate in this deliverance. And he had all these reasons why he couldn't be the one. And God was like, no. It's like I don't know if you ever had this happen to you. It's happened like maybe once or twice in my life. This kind of, like I mentioned this scenario where like you think this person will want to join you in this thing. You invite them and then they don't. And then you say, well what? And they give you this reason. It's no problem. We can do this. We can come up. Well, it's this other reason. Oh, well, it's no problem. We can take care of that. And you just realize, wait a minute, they just don't want to go. And God is this way, but for God, He's angered at this. It's just like that rich man who threw a wedding feast, and everyone had these excuses, right? And said, well, they won't go. None of those who were invited will come in. But amazingly, Moses is still the guy. God chose Moses for this. Moses doesn't get to beg off. Moses finally just gets to the place that says, I'm going to check the box here that says I'm not coming, okay? And God says, I don't accept that. You are going. And he has to go. And so we pick up then in verse 18. Moses' return. Let's read verses 18 through 31. Let's 18 through 26 we'll read there. We'll pick up 27 through 31 last. So verse 18, Moses went back to Jethro, his father-in-law, and said to him, "Please let me go back to my brothers in Egypt to see whether they are still alive." And Jethro said to Moses, "Go in peace." And the Lord said to Moses in Midian, "Go back to Egypt, for all the men who were seeking your life are dead." So Moses took his wife and his sons, plural, and had them ride on a donkey, and went back to the land of Egypt. And Moses took the staff of God in his hand. Right? He remembered the staff. And the Lord said to Moses, "When you go back to Egypt, see that you do before Pharaoh all the miracles that I have put in your power. But I will harden his heart so that he will not let the people go. Then you shall say to Pharaoh, 'Thus says the Lord, Israel is my firstborn son. And I say to you, let my son go, that he may serve me. If you refuse to let him go, behold, I will kill your firstborn son.'" At a lodging place on the way, the Lord met him and sought to put him to death. Then Zipporah took a flint and cut off her son's foreskin and touched Moses' feet with it and said, "Surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me." So he let him alone. It was then that she said, "A bridegroom of blood," because of the circumcision. Very confusing and peculiar passage, which I will argue is maybe wrongly translated in some of our Bibles, and some assumptions are made that are very misleading. All right, verse 18. Moses went back to Jethro, his father-in-law, and said to him, "Please let me go back to my brothers in Egypt to see whether they are still alive." Surely has to be an idiom. I don't think he can't possibly mean now that he's wondering if they are even alive. But rather just, I want to go check on them. How are they? Are they still alive? I mean, it was really, really bad when he left. Really bad. And there had been periods where they were just wholesale slaughtered, babies thrown into the river and killed and murdered and all kinds of things. Let me go see how they are. See if they're still alive. And Jethro said to Moses, "Go in peace." And the Lord said to Moses in Midian, so now he's still in Midian, hasn't left yet. He says, "Go back to Egypt, for all the men who were seeking your life are dead." And it's amazing that God even tells him anything again. But there's more reassurance. The men who were seeking your life have passed away. Go. And I think that's the reason Moses brings his family. Because of that confidence. He comes to Jethro and says, "Let me go back and see if they're still alive." I think the idea there might be, let me go and leave my family here with you. Let me leave and see how they are. Maybe he means to go scope things out and then come back and grab family if it's safer or whatever. I don't know. But he intends, this is what's in store. I'm going to go up and just go tell Pharaoh to let everybody go. It just doesn't seem really safe. And so let me go and check on my kin. But when God says, "Go back to Egypt, for all the men who were seeking your life are dead," I think is the thing that gives Moses the confidence. Verse 20, "So Moses took his wife and his sons and had them ride on a donkey and went back to the land of Egypt, and Moses took the staff of God in his hand." Now, Moses' return, verses 18 through 26, is this really weird set of things. You have verses 18 through 20, Moses seems very concerned with, as a father, with his family and his sons. We've only read about one son so far, who was given a name, Goshen, and now he has another son who's not named yet. He's traveling with his sons, and he takes his wife and his sons and has them ride on a donkey. He's providing for his children. It's a tender picture. It's an odd detail to include, I think, that he's put them on his donkey. Can't you just say, "and they made their way"? But he puts them on a donkey and went back to the land of Egypt. So you have this way that Moses is dealing with. He's terribly concerned for the safety of his family. He's reassured of God that it's okay to take them. And when he takes them, he provides for them comfortable travel. And then in verses 21 through 23, we read about God now speak and the way God treats His firstborn as it relates to the threatening of Pharaoh's firstborn. And the Lord said to Moses, when you go back to Egypt, see that you do before Pharaoh all the miracles that I put in your power. But I will harden his heart so that he will not let the people go. And then you shall say to Pharaoh, thus says the Lord, Israel, the people, these slaves you have, they are collectively my firstborn son. And I say to you, let my son go, that he may serve me. This is God relating to Pharaoh. He says, Pharaoh, I want you to understand, I know they're your slaves, but I think of these people as my firstborn son. And I'm telling you, father to father, let my firstborn son go, that he may serve me. And if you refuse to let him go, behold, I will kill your firstborn son. And then we read in verses 24 through 26 about Zipporah and her care for her firstborn son. And it's described as her firstborn son now, not as Moses' son, as it was earlier. Moses took his wife and his sons, verse 20. But now it's come to Zipporah, we're talking about her son. This son is no longer described as Moses' son, but as her son. It's curious. Now, at a lodging place along the way, there was room in the inn, evidently, for Moses and Zipporah and his two sons. The Lord met him and sought to put him to death. Now, let me ask, verse 24. Who is him? Anybody have a definitive answer? It must be Moses, or it must be his oldest son, or his youngest son. We don't know. Now, I don't know what the NASB does, but in verse 25, then Zipporah took a flint and cut off her son's foreskin and touched, what does it say? What does the text say? Moses. What's, you got a footnote there? His. Moses is absent in the text. Significantly absent in the text. And said, surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me. Well, the problem is the word bridegroom, that word is only ever used to mean bridegroom in the wedding ceremony. It's used in lots of other places to talk about a son-in-law or someone who is related to you. Think of this. This is the key thing. Related to you by covenant. Does this make sense? It's like like we have an adopted son, where it's like it's not a biological son. You are son, but by this other means, this covenant bond, this legal agreement that was signed to make it official. You're mine by covenant. And it's very possible that is what is meant here. And the other reason I think this is, look at verse 26. So he let him alone, that is, he that is the Lord, let him alone. It was then that she said, a bridegroom of blood, referring to the circumcision. Now, you might say, what are we talking about? What do you mean, Jeff? Here's the idea. I think I've been convinced of this by two commentaries who were very thorough in their reasoning for this. I'll try to give you in a nutshell. At a lodging place along the way, the Lord met him and sought to put him to death. The Lord met this son and sought to put him to death. Then Zipporah took a flint, not a knife, but a flint, stone, which is what they would have used often in ceremonies and things, and cut off her son's foreskin and touched his feet. And said, and feet there are a euphemism. She laid his hands upon his privates, right? In a ceremonial way. You understand? As part of this is what circumcision was, right? Don't forget, who is Zipporah? She was a shepherdess. Like, she knows all about castration. She knows all about taking care of animals. She comes from a father who is a priest in the land of Midian, where they had some of these practices. She knows evidently she knows exactly what to do. She's not like, Moses, direct me into how I should do this. Moses, you do this. I've never seen this done. I don't know what's going on. She knows exactly what to do. She doesn't even come to Moses in any way. She does this, right? Touched his feet with it and said, surely you are, and if we were to translate it not as bridegroom of blood, right, but you are a son of covenant by blood to me. Or a relative of, we are bound together in this covenant of blood. Now, what would that mean? Something like this. This is what I think is very plausible, the background of this. Moses comes to Midian, and he has forgotten everything. He's content to live in this land as a sojourner, I'm over here. He has a son, and he names his son Gershon because I live as a foreigner in the foreign land. He's not saying, I live as a foreigner in a land because I've been dispossessed from my people, and I long to be back to them and to deliver them. And all. He's not even thinking about that. He's content to dwell here. She thought of him initially as an Egyptian. Right? Remember they said that? This Egyptian had saved us and delivered us? She's just this guy, or he's just this guy to her. And now God has showed up and interrupted all of that and said, now, Moses, you are to identify with these people. You're to deliver them. You're my man. Moses had never circumcised his kids. In Genesis 17, we read that anyone among these people who is not circumcised shall be cut off from the people. And so here Moses brings his family, and God meets the son standing in his way. Either he falls gravely sick, or he's there with, as an angel with some sword or something in some kind of way, something that we see with Balaam, right? Something like that, some kind of way. And Zipporah gets the message, and Zipporah knows, because evidently she has the background knowledge either from her own upbringing, but then also the stories, obviously, that Moses would have told her, some about his people, that she knows this child must be circumcised or he can't go and be a part of any of this. And so she circumcises him. They're all in. So he let him alone. It was then that she said, a bridegroom of blood. She said like a son of blood, this covenant, because of the circumcision. This child was brought into the covenant through his blood. Blood of the circumcision. I hope that makes sense. We can hash that out if you want to later, but that's in some. Now, verse 27. Verse 27. I need to stop for a moment. On Moses' return, we have these three incidents about father-son, or parent and son. And in both, the first one, you see Moses' tender care for his family and his concern for their safety. In the last one, we see Zipporah doing what she had until now resisted doing and refused to do. Now she's willing to do, that she might preserve the life of her son and ensure that her son gets to partake in these blessings that God means to provide. That's profound. In the middle one, we see God saying, Israel is my firstborn son, and threatening those who are threatening that firstborn. And that's the thing we ought to take out of this whole section more than anything else. I mean, there are things to learn in all of this, but this idea, central to this, is God's identification of Israel as his firstborn. All these other things that you see and assume about, about the way people work and labor for their firstborn and do things that they normally wouldn't do for the benefit of their child, God means to do for the people of Israel. And He's sending Moses now to confront the man who's mistreating them. And so this is what's paramount in this, is that We're being trained, in a sense, encouraged to think of God as a father, to this nation as his son. How will the father deliver his son? How will he treat them? What will he do? Before he's begun to do anything here, we're being encouraged to see God as a father to them. And all of his actions which flow out of this as a father rescuing his son from those who have him captive. And from that standpoint, I'd say we all ought to be very aware. I mean, every father, every mother ought to know, like, oh, he means, like, he's serious. He means business. He really means business. The way he says to go talk to Pharaoh, tell Pharaoh, listen, I see these people as my firstborn son. I just want you to know, if you don't let them go, I'm going to kill your firstborn son. What a statement. We don't often think of, like, God ever having said that to someone, right? I mean, give me my firstborn or I'll kill your firstborn. It's like it belongs in some movie about revenge, you know. I'm going to kill them all, you know, it's that kind of thing. And God says, look, if you don't let them go, I will kill your firstborn. And what did he do? He killed them all the firstborn of Egypt. He meant business. This threat was real. He did even more than he threatened. That's amazing. Well, now we come to verse 27, and we come to the people's belief. They believe. Moses, look at that. Verse 27, the Lord said to Aaron, go into the wilderness to meet Moses. Now this is the part that I say is maybe out of order chronologically. Earlier God said, verse 14, is there not Aaron your brother the Levite? I know that he can speak well. Behold, he is coming out to meet you, and when he sees you, he will be glad in his heart. Now it might mean, maybe should read it that God is saying, listen, go and you'll find that Aaron meets you on your way. But it seems like he's saying Aaron is coming out already to meet you. And if Aaron is already coming out, then it means now when God's, verse 27, the Lord said to Aaron, go into the wilderness to meet Moses, that it's actually going back in time before the conversation with Moses at the burning bush. Right? And saying, now this is what God had said to Aaron. In which case, look at the contrast. Either way, go into the wilderness to meet Moses. So he went. Yeah, Aaron is the Levite. It's amazing. He just went. Doesn't tell us about, but Moses left us. I don't want anything to do with that guy. He grew up in the palace and he always had nice things. Now I got to go find him and bring him back. You bring him back. Nothing like that. Nothing. He just goes. So he went and met him at the mountain of God. So Moses was in Midian. You can look up here, right? So Moses is in Midian. He goes out to Mount Horeb, meets with God, goes back to Midian, decides to get everything packed up and go. And now Aaron meets him at the mountain of God, right? Meets him at Horeb. Second time Moses has been there. Probably the first time for Aaron. Not the last time they'll be there, though. So he went and met him at the mountain of God, and what does Aaron do? He kissed him. All right? Not a romantic kiss, right? But a familial kiss. A hug, an embrace. We don't do this in our culture. We don't kiss one another on the cheek, but others do, right? He kissed him. Aaron meets Moses with love and joy. And Moses told Aaron all the words of the Lord with which he had sent him to speak, and all the signs that he had commanded him to do. And then Moses and Aaron went and gathered together all the elders of the people of Israel. You see, Aaron didn't have to be persuaded. Aaron didn't need all the signs. God told Aaron to go. Aaron went. Aaron hears secondhand from Moses the things that God told him to do. He said, yeah, let's go. It's amazing. Moses is the problem here. Aaron's doing just fine. And Moses told Aaron all the words of the Lord with which he had sent him to speak, and all the signs that he had commanded him to do. Then Moses and Aaron went and gathered together all the elders of the people of Israel. Aaron spoke, not Moses. Aaron spoke all the words that the Lord had spoken to Moses, and did the signs in the sight of the people. And the people believed. And when they heard that the Lord had visited the people of Israel, and that he had seen their affliction, they bowed their heads and worshiped. So it's like who was right, Moses or God? Did they need the signs or not? Well, I think that the indication is Moses was wrong. First of all, Aaron believed him immediately. Secondly, when they gathered the elders of the people of Israel, and Aaron spoke all the words that the Lord had spoken to Moses, and did the signs in the sight of the people. So he did all of that. And the people believed. But it explicitly says, and when they had heard that the Lord had visited the people of Israel and they had seen their affliction, they bowed their heads and worshiped. The first thing they were told to do was to go to them and tell them he had seen their affliction, was visiting them to deliver them. That was the first thing they were supposed to be told. They were told that, they bowed and worshiped. Right there. But the conversation wasn't over, the meeting wasn't over. They had all these signs to reassure them, to fill the people's heart with great confidence that God would do this. The signs were added as well. And at least at the beginning, the people of Israel believed the words and they believed for the signs. God was right. But God also wanted the people to have these signs as well. They bowed their heads and worshiped. And I just can't help but think, sometimes we read, the stories in the Bible, and certainly there's a way we can relate to all of them. Some of them are more readily relatable than others. And I just want you to picture yourself as the people of Israel here. Even in your life. Look, there's hardship, there's things that we know, we've got distant promises made long ago that God has said, things will be different, we'll deliver you. This is a reality. We're looking for a new heavens and a new earth. We're not there right now at all in so many ways. But God has promised this deliverance. He showed up to work on our behalf. These signs for them, they hear the words, it's a welcome message. God means to deliver me. He's going to bring us into something better. Great. You hear that and believe it as well and worship God for it. There's also these signs. God has done explicit things in your life in front of your eyes to gain your confidence and trust, to make you more sure and more certain of this thing that's still yet out there to be done. He's going to ask you to go through things, to endure things. Things just didn't get better for them from here. They got to the point where they were questioning why God even showed up to do this at all. But this isn't the reality. God was going to do it. He was going to bring it to pass. It wasn't going to end before it was completed. They needed these miracles. They needed these words, this miraculous sending of a man to give them any confidence at all. Their faith was so weak for so many of them. And you just see, again, we saw it in Genesis over and over, especially with Abraham and his life, but we see it with Moses. We see it here with the people of Israel. God means to win their confidence, stir their hearts, encourage them to believe. He wants this confidence from us. And again, we may find ourselves in these same situations. We do find ourselves in the same situation where much of what God has promised us is out there yet to come to pass. And in the meantime, God is giving us words, giving us signs to gain our confidence. We ought to see them as those things. It's not right for God to answer some prayer of yours in some mighty way, and then you forget it 3 years later, and when they come to the next challenge, you don't even think about it anymore. The people of Israel what were these signs for? So the next day when they woke up and they thought, I wonder if it's really true. Oh yeah, I remember these things that God did. Right? It's to bolster their confidence. It's the same way with us. Those things that God does in front of our eyes, and we know it's God, we can't forget those things. We need to remember them. Does it not what else? Does it not increase your confidence greatly to think that God could speak of the people of Israel as His firstborn son? How much more the redeemed of the Lord? How much more those who are blood bought by the Lord Jesus Christ? We are His children, His adopted children. God says elsewhere that He would, even for the nation of Israel, He would give nations in exchange for them. how much more us, his eternal sons? Well, or everlasting sons. Beloved, those are just a few things that I think are massively helpful about this text. Certainly I want you to understand it. I hope you do. The things that are in here, I know there's certainly issues that may come up you want clarification on. I'm happy to try to answer some of those things, but in the main, this is what happens in this chapter. We'll see now in the next chapter how differently Pharaoh responds, how he responds exactly the way God said he would, but how different it is from the people of Israel, and try to get an understanding of all that. So that's it for today. Are there any questions or comments anybody has?